For 3 agonizing years, the ancient stone walls of the Albora mansion held nothing but the heavy, suffocating silence of loss. Cihan Albora, a leader hardened by blood feuds and family duty, walked those cold halls carrying a heart transformed into an absolute desert. Ever since Alya fled Mardin to save her children from the endless cycle of violence, Cihan lived as a hollow shell of a man. Every single day, his eyes scanned the golden horizon of the valley, tortured by the memory of the woman he loved. His only lifeline to sanity was their young son, Dennis. Through distant, late-night phone calls and rare photographs sent from her voluntary exile, Alya allowed Cihan to hear his son's voice and watch him grow. Those photographs were Cihan's most sacred treasure, locked safely inside his private desk. But behind those scattered updates, Alya carried a secret so massive, so sacred, that it would eventually shatter Cihan to his very core. She had given birth in absolute anonymity to a baby girl, a daughter who carried every single unmistakable feature of Cihan Albora. For 36 months, Alya raised that little girl in the shadows, far from the reach of deadly family rivalries and far from the father who had every right to hold her. It was not hatred or bitterness that drove Alya to make such a drastic choice, but the paralyzing terror of a mother who had seen too much blood spilled on the mansion grounds. That silence was blown apart the moment the heavy oak doors of the Albora mansion creaked open under the scorching midday sun. The guards froze as an absolute dead silence blanketed the courtyard. There stood Alya, her face worn by years of exhaustion, holding young Dennis by the hand. But time stopped entirely when Cihan's eyes landed on what Alya held tightly against her chest, a baby girl wrapped in a soft blanket, sleeping peacefully. Cihan descended the stone steps, each step heavy like lead chains. The sudden surge of seeing Alya alive after 3 long years was instantly crushed by a shocking realization. Looking down at the diminutiveness of that sleeping baby, no medical test or explanation was needed. A single glance at those facial features told Cihan everything. This was his blood, his flesh, his legitimate daughter. The emotional collision was so violent he clenched his fists to keep from collapsing. The joy of her return exploded into the bitter agony of betrayal. With a voice trembling with suppressed rage and 3 years of built-up pain, Cihan sliced through the suffocating air, demanding how she could strip him of the sacred right to hold his own daughter from the day she was born. Alya lowered her head, fighting back tears, begging for forgiveness, while pleading that her silence was born out of sheer terror for their child's survival. Inside the grand living room, the heavy doors slammed shut, trapping the unbearable tension within 4 walls. Cihan paced relentlessly in front of the window, his jaw tight as he stared blankly out at the valley. He was in no mood for rationalizations. What spoke through him was the visceral agony of a father robbed of his child's first smiles, first steps, and first words. He demanded to know why she had condemned him to a cold grave of uncertainty. Alya stepped forward, looking straight into his eyes, forcing him to remember the nightmare she had fled, the stray bullets, the deadly enemies lurking behind every hill, and the fresh graves dug day after day.
She confessed that discovering her pregnancy in total isolation filled her with a paralyzing fear that Albora's enemies would target her unborn child. She feared that if Cihan knew, he would bring the baby back into this meat grinder of endless war. Silence was the only shield she believed could keep both their children alive. Cihan listened in absolute silence. The rigid posture of the unyielding leader began to crack. He was no longer looking at a selfish woman who acted out of spite, but a deeply exhausted mother who had spent 3 years imprisoned by her own paranoid fear. Yet, broken trust cannot be mended with a tearful explanation. Coldly setting the boundary, Cihan declared that while the mansion would always be her safe home as the mother of his children, she could not expect him to pretend the past 3 years never happened. The foundation of their bond was shattered, and building it back would take time, immense time. Alya accepted his words without protest, promising to spend every single day proving her loyalty and waiting patiently until he felt in his soul that he could trust her again. This profound shift within the mansion catalyzed an unexpected change in the family dynamic. the iron-willed matriarch, who had historically been Alya's harshest critic, witnessed the agonizing pain both had endured during those lost years. Moved by their shared grief, she stepped in to heal the rift, openly supporting Alya's presence and advising Cihan not to let pride and bitterness ruin their last chance at true family happiness. Adding to this fragile healing was the long-awaited return of Nare. Having completed months of psychological rehabilitation following the tragic loss of her husband, Nare returned with complete emotional stability. The moment she walked through the doors and saw Alya holding the baby, there were no reproaches. Nare wrapped Alya in a tight, comforting embrace, understanding all too well the extreme desperation that drove her choices, instantly becoming Alya's strongest emotional pillar. Late that night, as the lights across the estate began to dim, Cihan walked quietly down the silent corridor. Stopping outside Alya's room, his pride urged him to walk away, but his paternal instinct proved far stronger. He turned the handle gently and stepped inside. Alya was adjusting the blankets over sleeping Dennis. Moving silently toward the wooden crib, Cihan reached down with infinite gentleness, sliding his large hands beneath the baby's tiny body and lifting her to his chest. For the very first time, the fierce leader of the Alboras held his baby daughter against his heart. Feeling her warm, gentle breath and brushing his fingers against her soft cheek, the tears he had held back all day finally overflowed in total silence. In that unforgettable moment, the resentment and fury of the morning dissolved completely into a sea of tenderness. After placing the baby back down, Cihan sat quietly on the floor beside Dennis, who woke up just enough to smile and wrap his small arms around his father's neck. Cihan whispered a solemn promise to his son, swearing that distance would never come between them again. Once Dennis drifted back to sleep, Cihan stood up and turned toward Alya. Standing face to face in the dim light, stripped of all defenses, Alya opened her heart entirely, detailing the crushing loneliness of her pregnancy, the pain of giving birth without him, and the daily struggle of raising their children alone.
Listening intently, Cihan's anger fully evaporated into profound understanding. Reaching out to touch her fingers, he admitted his feelings had never waned, but reiterated that rebuilding their truth required absolute transparency. In the days that followed, warmth slowly returned to the Albora estate. Cihan spent every spare moment with his daughter, while Alya resumed her work as a doctor at the local hospital. Quiet sunsets on the terrace were once again filled with gentle conversations and meaningful glances. Yet in Mardin, a prolonged calm is never permanent. It is merely the quiet prelude to a gathering storm. As peace seemed to settle over the mansion, a dark luxury sedan slipped discreetly into the city at dusk, parking on a high alleyway overlooking the Albora property. A mature man of imposing elegance and cold eyes stepped out, carrying the aura of immense power and decades of buried secrets. Using high-precision binoculars, he began tracking every movement of the family, watching Alya, the children, and Cihan with calculating patience. The truth behind his presence is an atomic revelation that threatens to reshape everything. This mysterious observer is none other than Alya's biological father. While Alya had no idea her own father was watching her from a distance, Cihan's sharp instincts quickly picked up on subtle anomalies around the perimeter. Acting immediately, he ordered security reinforced at every access point and launched a discreet investigation to uncover the stranger's identity, knowing that taking peace for granted is the deadliest mistake anyone can make in Mardin. What do you think about Alya's decision to hide her daughter to protect her, and can Cihan ever fully overcome the pain of those lost years? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite drama storylines.